anyone? James, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning, Evan.
So it seems I can see James trying to speak.
You can't hear me?
Can you hear me? Nice to see you.
You can't hear me, Evans?
James, I can hear you, but I think Evans has a problem with his.
No, now I can hear you all.
Ah, good. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I think we'll not wait for the rest. They'll find us on the way. We had a great session last week. And I think for those of us who have not been part of this conversation, today is the third. And I think just one more session left to the end of this series. And on the first lesson, we looked at, we introduced the members of the network to Foresight and futures thinking concept, and members were able to discuss and analyze the various methodologies that this concept uses, while seeking better ways of including those methodologies for organizational effectiveness and success. So that was the first session that we had. And it was really, thought-provoking session. And then we moved to the second session last week, Paige, if I'm not wrong. And this focused on the need for clearly defining the issues that we face as organizations, as a sector, so that we could have a common understanding and be able to then apply the Foresight methodologies that were discussed on session one and the tools to ensure that we get an organized giving for the welfare of others. And today's session, let me just check, we'll be focusing on the systems thinking approach. And I think without much ado, I want to welcome Dr. Katindi so that we can proceed with the session. And I to also take this early opportunity to welcome all of you and appreciate you for finding it important and necessary to join this session for the growth of the sector, for strengthening of the institutions, specifically within the membership of EAPN. So thank you so much, and over to you, Dr. Katindi.
Thank you, and good morning. Sorry, I think we had some hiccups because for some reason, I'm not getting email from EAPN. So I didn't even have the link at the morning, although it was sent to me. So sorry for joining in late. It's really wonderful to be able to do this with you again. And I just want to share my screen. If the host can enable me to share the screen, I'll be happy. And just to, as that is being sorted out, I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment about any reflections you may have had based on last week's presentation or session. Any reflections? Okay, I can share my screen now. Any reflections from last time? Today, I want this to be a bit interactive because it's part of what we need to be able to understand the concept. And today we are going to be looking at systems thinking. Anybody with any reflections? Nope. Okay, I will trust that I'm either doing a very good job or maybe we need much more time to internalize the concept. So let's move on into systems thinking. I don't know whether I can see a show of hands if anyone has done systems thinking or come at least across the concept of systems thinking. Anybody? Chilande, Clement, David, Edna, Evans, Francis Kiwanga, and Francis Uhadi, James, Janet, Mike, Nasim, Shimi. Anybody? Okay, Janet has. Okay, thank you, Janet. Nice to see you, Janet, on the call.
Thank you.
Okay, only Janet maybe has done systems thinking. Okay, so that's what we are going to be working with today. So the first week we did introductions to foresight and futures thinking, as Evans has said. The last week we did a lot about some of the methodologies you can begin to use to think about the future. So this week we are doing systems thinking, and then the last week we are going to just basically tie up everything and try and do a practical project, maybe by answering one of the questions. Last week we introduced you to these tools, pastel analysis, SWOT analysis. But although you have used them in maybe strategic planning, we did use these tools to try and see how they are used in foresight thinking, okay? Trends monitoring, forecasting, and scenarios building. And we did then say that part of what you do with data is, yes, to look at the past, the present, and the future, but in a non-linear way, so that you understand change dynamics, and so that as an organization, you respond to those change dynamics by making strategic decisions that you need to be able to then position yourself as an organization. So let's move into systems thinking. What do we mean by systems thinking? So systems thinking and even futures thinking is not so much, I like to call it something that I would like people in Africa to use as a mindset, or a type of awareness that you have when you're doing your daily work, or when you're, when you're trying to solve problems within organizations. And so when we say it is a mindset or a type of awareness, it's a way of thinking about the world. Because the education systems that we have gone through usually teach us to think about things in a linear way or in a very pipeline way. So I say, for example, the reason why you have a department of history or a department of, let's say, sociology, is because we have these binaries that teach us to think in a certain way. So when I'm an economist, I feel like my profession is much more, I don't know, superior perhaps than, let's say, a sociologist. It's just an example. Or if I'm a lawyer, because I'm trained to see things a certain way. And yet the world and the problems we are trying to solve do not work in binaries. Everything is coexisting in the society. And so when you have those binaries, a lot of times you miss out on some of the things, critical and obvious things that are happening around you, because you have a certain framework or a certain lens of looking at things. And so systems thinking is that mindset that helps you to look at the world from a point of view of everything that is happening. Okay, and we will give you examples of how you do that. So it's about thinking about the world and how it works, so that you can work within and with that messy world, because that messy world is not in those pipelines or in those binaries. So of course, at the end of the day, so for example, if you're thinking about your worldview is philanthropy, it's important, yes, to open up your world and your mindset into the world, are using the philanthropic mindset, of course, beyond the philanthropic mindset. But then now, because you're solving issues within the philanthropy space, is to bring that knowledge back so that you can be much more strategic than somebody who's looking at issues from a binary perspective. It is also a set of tools that is used to increase understanding. So you're getting vocabulary, methods, concepts that we apply in this kind of analysis or in this kind of worldview. And then the issue is, the idea is to understand process, is to know that collective process incorporates diversity of worldviews. You want to do this. I said that in the first, I think, meeting we had, I said that part of the danger we have in our society is to think that knowledge rests with one person. And we have disadvantaged ourselves because we normally don't think collectively. So part of systems thinking is to understand what resources are around us and what resources, including that expertise, can we put together so that you have that collective process that incorporates this diversity of worldviews, okay? And then, of course, then that means you have participatory methods, you are bringing in diverse perspectives, you're bringing in attention to different contexts outside what your worldview is. And then you're being able to delve into very difficult conversations, but for purposes of getting answers or intelligence to solve problems. So I've said that in many words, but just know that systems thinking is a mindset, it's a tool, and it's also part of a process to help us think differently about the world. I'm going to ask, I did say, get a piece of paper and pen. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So, and I'm going to ask you to draw the process of making a cup of tea. Not explain, but draw the process. Of course, when you're showing us the process, how your process, the process of making a cup of tea, you'll explain to us, right? You'll explain to us what you drew. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Let me stop sharing so that I can see what you share with me. And then, yeah. Evans, and you cannot not draw. Don't say my wife will make me the cup of tea. When you are a bachelor, you made your cup of tea. So make draw for me.
I am.
So just do a quick drawing. Okay. Chilande, I see your contribution. You have come across systems thinking. Thank you. Okay, Peter, I think you're on call and you've just come in. So what we are doing is trying to spend at least now maybe 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes to draw a cup of, how you make a cup of tea. So we are drawing the process of making a cup of tea. If you finish, you can just open your screen and show us as the rest finish. Catherine Michobo, karibu. We are spending the next 1 minute trying to draw how to make a cup of tea. So you can quickly grab a pen and paper and draw a cup of tea. Not a cup of tea, don't draw the cup of tea, draw the process of making a cup of tea. Anybody has finished? Chilande.
You didn't say how big the paper is, so disclaimer.
Okay.
All
right.
So that's my hand. This is my hand.
Yeah.
Putting in like the tea leaves. This is a sieve. Gosh, how do you go? Yeah, that's a sieve. So the 2 holes there.
Yeah.
You can see some more brown little tea leaves have been geared inside. Then
Yes.
this is water. Hey, gosh. Yeah, and my cup. So there. It's a simple process.
So your cup has hot water, isn't it?
It has hot water, so you can see the blue waves.
And the sieve is there. Okay, to try. So yours is black tea. It has the elements of a cup, water, hot water at least.
Yes.
And tea leaves. Okay.
Yes. In fact, In fact, let me add some smoke.
All right.
to show it's hot.
Okay, good job. Thank you. Thank you very much. Someone else? Okay, Evans. This bachelor's cup of tea, let's look at it.
Chilanda has just set very high standards.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but so this is my.
Oh, sorry, we lost your video.
Uh-oh.
I can still see him. It's just really tiny.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't see video. Oh, all right. Maybe I'm on page 2. Oh, okay. I can
there.
see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is my sufuria on that source of fire.
Okay.
It's a jug pouring in water.
Okay.
This next one is me assuming to be putting tea leaves into the boiling water.
Okay.
And the next one, I can see Chilande not agree with me, is sieving the tea leaves into a jug.
Okay.
And then the other one is my tea on top of something like a table.
Okay. And then you enjoy your cup of tea. Awesome. At least we know that you can survive in a desert, right? Okay. Anybody else wants to give it a try? Francis Uhadi, yes, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I hope we can see. I see Vance is using the tea leaves without tea bags.
Aha, okay.
Using the tea bags. Huh? So I have to take water from the tap,
Yeah.
bowl, and then I have to boil. You see the boiling and there's a bit of fumes up here.
Yeah.
Then I have sugar on this side.
Yes.
Or could it be honey?
Okay.
I have my cup and tea bag.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much, Francis. We see yours is not a messy way of making a cup of tea, but very ungwana-like.
I cannot do like Chilande. She's a professional.
You had leakage. Yours was more neat.
Okay, Shimi, I see your hand up. And Janet is drinking her cup of tea. Shimi, you're on mute. Yes, I can see now. Open your microphone. Okay, good.
Yes, I have. Okay, so this is mine. It starts with me going to the tap to get water, and then use that water into a pot to boil it. And after having boiled it, put it in, find tea bags, and then having found the tea bags, I take the cup, and then I mix the boiled water with the tea bags, and then I use a teaspoon to mix the tea, and then my tea is ready. That's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think maybe we could, I can't see any other hand up. Yeah, so we could, okay. Janet, do you want to explain yours? Yours is live. Okay, all right.
Mine is in form of a pie chart. I mean, not a pie chart, a circle. Eh?
Yes.
So the first stage, I pick my water and it's and milk and water. I like milk in my tea, and I put that in a cup. That's the first circle. Then I move to the next stage. I can't see very well, but the next stage is I put that on the fire.
Yeah.
To boil.
Yes.
So my fourth stage is where I add my tea leaves, after it has boiled, and sieve. Then I put that in my water. So mine is in a stage. Exactly.
It's in a stage, almost showing the process. Awesome.
It's showing the process. So if I want to start again, I go back to the first stage.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So thank you for that. And I think Janet has started us with a conversation about what you notice about all those processes. So she says hers is a process. So you go to there's a first stage, a second stage, it's circular. If you want to go back, you can start again and do the circle. So there's that issue. What other things do you realize about this making of a cup of tea? You can just open your mic and speak, anybody? Yeah. Shimi?
Okay, so what I noticed is that there are many ways to actually getting that cup of tea.
Yes.
The process could be very different and very diverse, but in the end, it's just a cup of tea. Very simply, just a cup of tea.
Yes. Thank you. We did that with a group that is like an international group, and some people were so shocked that you can actually put milk in your tea. Right? So yes, you're right that it's a very, and the point I think to make here is that it's very culture specific, isn't it? That some people, there are different ways of doing it. And like Francis did it with a tea bag, no sieving, you know, while Evans was busy sieving his tea in a sieve, yes. So yes, the process, the outcome is the same, but the process is different for different people. Anything else?
Hello.
So we have the issue of yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
It also depends from your environment in your country. It also depends what it is. Because you Google tea to you. Because you Google tea is tea. It's water and majani. And not
exactly. So
it's as if tea have its own innovative way according to different backgrounds. Innovation where we use others will put even ginger, others will put even garlic or anything, and still is tea.
Yeah. Yes.
English tea ni ile najua ni kama ya kuomba kale kadogo tu ya kukimbia.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have sugar, and tea probably that's their tea. So tea can also become very innovative way of doing it in a different way. So you can make many, but there can be many, even lemon tea.
Yeah, it's tea, exactly. So there is an issue of interpretation here, and I really appreciate that. I couldn't see, I think it was Clement who was speaking. There's an issue of interpretation here. And about what, when you hear tea, what do you hear? Somebody hears lemon tea, another one hears spice tea, another one English tea, whatever it is, but there's an issue of interpretation. So I like that a lot. And I think, Clement, you also bring in very interesting issues about the elements. So your interpretation determines the elements you will pick, and then the process you will take to make your tea. So those are the issues I needed to bring out here. So when it comes to issues, around systems thinking, okay? So our focus is the elements of the tea making. And in a systems thinking approach, the elements are very important, okay? Now, I'll show you how we get to the system. But so the first items we got, based on your understanding of the tea you want to make, there's what you collected as your elements, and then your elements determined your process. So the first thing is the elements. And in systems thinking, the elements are the least important. They're the most visible, but they're least important, and I'll show you why. They're the easiest, of course, to see, but they're not always physical. So if you think about, depending on the issue you're solving, it depends on whether then you will have physical elements on or non-physical elements. So if you think about a sports game, for example, even that has elements, okay? And what would be the elements of a sports game? The players who are physical, yes. It will be issues around the team, yes, but also issues like fun, team spirit, loyalty. Those will be elements of a system. But let's come to our tea making process. Janet did something very interesting, that because we are making tea, you don't put everything together. There's the issue of collecting the elements. Then there's how you start, how you go to the next stage until you finish, until you, as Evans was showing us, drink your cup of tea, right? So there's an issue of what are the interconnections, okay? What are the interconnections that explain the tea making process? And so the interconnection capture the rules or the ideas and the relationships that tie the elements together. So if you think about this in the context of philanthropy, one can argue, what are the elements of the philanthropic space, so to speak? Ambrose is on the waiting room. What are the elements of philanthropy? And one would then want to pick those up and say, okay, my elements are, let's say, resources, money. My elements are community. My elements are ABCD. But the second thing is what are the relationships in those elements? How does it all come together? What are the rules of the game? Okay? What are the relationships that tie these elements together? So the interconnections are of two types, physical flows and the information flow. And this signals the decisions that are being made and the action points that are being taken so that they determine how something operates. So what we are saying is that you cannot have a system when there are no linkages or when there are no relationships. The third element that comes in is that now, or if we stay just with the issue of connections, we've been schooled, like I said at the beginning, that relationships are linear, what we call LAMO. We think in LAMO. We think in linear, anthropocentric ways, mechanistic ways, and in ordered step-by-step format. But another thing we need to understand is that it depends on the issue or the problem you're solving. So we seldom think about facts, the fact that relationships are not always simple. So making a cup of tea is a very simple problem. And it's not as complex. And so the reason for that is then you can have what Janet was showing us, the process. It's very linear, okay? Because it's a simple problem. But the more you think about the challenges that we are facing in our, let's say, whether it's community or the issues we have to deal with on a daily basis, what tends to happen is that a lot of those problems are complex. But because we've been taught to think about issues in a linear way, anthropocentric way, mechanistic way, in an ordered way, we don't really think about solving, we always solve complex problems in linear ways. And that is part of the problem why we are not innovative in the way we think about our issues. And so interconnections are dependent on the nature of the problem. So if a cup of tea, we say this can be linear. Now, what is this? This is a rocket going to the moon, right? Is it a simple problem? Imagine the people who set up this system together. Is it a simple problem? No, it's a much more complicated problem, because if I'm not in this field, I cannot basically participate in this process or in this system. And so it's a more complicated problem, even for those who do it, because they have to work with a certain precision to be able to get this rocket to the moon. Now, think about an even bigger problem. I'm raising toddlers right now. One is 6 and the other one is 4 heading 5 next month. Now, in the next 20 years that, God willing, they will be in my hands, I have to just hope that in those 20 years, I will have done a good job to raise decent and good human beings. Now, a point will come when it will not be in my hands, because it's not just me who's influencing their lives like this rocket, which is totally dependent on the people that are making it, but there are many other factors in these children's lives that are going to influence how they think, how they feel, how they make decisions. So it becomes a very complex problem, because I don't have all the information about the things that they will have to face and how I will have to help them navigate that terrain. I'm not the only one who is involved in their lives. Their friends, their teachers. Sometimes they come from school and I hear the language and I wonder, who taught you that? Because we don't speak like that in our house. And the process of undoing that and trying to teach them that that language is not good and that you need to think in a certain way, is so complex. And you can only hope that you're doing a good job 20 years after that, right? Those of you who have teenagers maybe have a better testament than I do. Then, so the complexity of a problem is determined by the level of information you have, the level of involvement, meaning the level of control, right, that you can have, the level of predictability of results or outcomes, right? A cup of tea, we know at least by the end of the day, based on the processes you have shown us, it will be palatable. At least it will not, maybe, I don't know if we all understand Kiswahili, haitaungua. It will be something that you can pretty much drink and keep warm, right? A rocket, based on if there are no faults, these are chances, at least you can predetermine 90% of the time that we are good to go. But a human being is so difficult because, again, like I said, you don't have everything that is needed for you to be in control and for that system to be able to turn out the way you want. And so the point I'm trying to make is, if you think about this in the context of philanthropy, you think about the elements, you think about everything that is going on in the system. What are the flows? What are the information flows that we have? What is the level of involvement, the level of control, the level of predictability? And what are the things we can begin to do to answer the questions that we asked on day one, right? Now, the other thing I want to ask you is to show you the third element. So there's elements in a system. You have the elements, you have the relationships or the interconnections. The third issue in any system is what we call the system itself. So these relationships over time bring out some patterns, you know, that there's something that is blocking my text here. So yes, that become the norm or the normal outcome. So what we are saying is that a lot of times we have defined a system a certain way, okay? But we haven't been careful to notice that these elements and these relationships over time produce a system. And sometimes we can say that we can, for example, say, and so our elements become students, schools, teachers, and books and stuff like that, like the curriculum. Now, when we look at the relationships, you can see that, yes, that system is in operation. But when you now monitor these elements and these interrelationships over time, the question becomes, what system does it produce? So there's a difference between the intention of the system and what it produces at the end. And I don't know whether I'm being too complex today. And I want you to look at something. This is a glacier in Iceland somewhere that was taken, you know, in 1986. Okay, what do you notice between these two elements, these two systems, so to speak? What does anybody notice? This is Iceland. This is 1986. This is 2019.
There's definitely a reduction in amount in 2019 compared to
the reduction in the ice, in the glacier, right? And this is just an example. If you think about it in even the lakes that we have around us, you can see over time, you know, maybe the lake was big and now it is almost shrinking. If you think about Mount Kilimanjaro, for example, a similar picture, if it was taken, would be the same. The ice is thinning. So if this is a glacier it's supposed to be that it's covered in snow. And that system was supposed to be like that. But if you have monitored those relationships over time, something is happening to the system, right? And a lot of times we work with, so we have a system called the philanthropy space, right? We know philanthropy is about giving. We know philanthropy is supposed to work a certain way to benefit communities, etc., and for the sake of humanity. That was the original intention. And sometimes when we are dealing with the system, we are dealing with the system as if it hasn't changed. And so outcomes define, so these relationships bring out the pattern. And one of the issues we discussed yesterday, and those who are not there, please listen to the first two recordings, that the importance of understanding patterns is because then you eventually begin to say, what is the system changing to become? And so how should I relate with it to be able to innovatively engage with it to produce results? So these outcomes define the function of a system and its purpose and its goal. So both are very contextual and therefore reveal the culture and mental models. These are just big words to say that the way a system is evolving determines the outcomes that you're going to get. So whereas the outcome at the beginning was one thing, the outcome in the end might be something totally different. And I'll give you just a very simple example. So let's ask ourselves, what is the purpose of sports? For example, if you think about the primary education, physical exercise, PE programs, or even a soccer match. I know we have soccer fans here, right? What is the purpose of any sports game? at least as was originally intended?
In school, Daktari, in school, we used to break the monotony of classes,
Yes.
each other.
Okay, to break the monotony of classes.
Also to build the physical strength of the learners.
To build the physical strength.
Yeah.
Someone has said to win. I agree with you, Catherine. Enhance communication. Okay. Yes. So like if you think about, Janet, if you think about, what is it called? This, the thing we do in offices, team building. Team building is some physical exercise. So you want to enhance communication, you want to enhance teamwork, isn't it? Guys, you don't watch any sports? Keep fit, exactly, and healthy, exactly, to socialize, yes, to promote unity, exactly. Okay, but what has sports become?
Sports has become a business.
Exactly. Sports has become a business. Let's look at why. So if you think about, for some people, it was a job to win social cause, competition, physical exercise, entertainment. But if you look at sports, if you continue engaging with sports like that, you will miss a big fundamental point of what is happening in the system. Why? Because what has the system become? Now it is franchise. It is about pressure. It's about buying players. It's about exclusive clubs. It's about super leagues. And because of that, we need to design the transition that happened and or will happen. And you need to know what is happening in that space, so that, and what companies do, profit-making companies say, I want to understand the system so that I can midwife the transition that I want to see. If you think, for example, about a cup of tea, right? There are people, at least in Africa, I think a cup of tea is drunk hot, right? Marketers sat down and thought, see, we can change the system and make cups of tea cold. So there is iced tea, right? And so that becomes a point of innovation. You start looking at midwifing another transition with a system that you have to create something new, okay? So there are two things I'm saying here. One is, there's a way the original intention of a system and how it was supposed to work. Over time, it changes because of technology, circumstances, time, it changes. And the fundamental point of any person is to understand this system that I have been given. How does it operate and how has it changed? What has become of that system? Because it is in understanding that then you understand how to engage with the rules of the game. Because by the time it moves from here to here, the rules of the game have changed. And so if you are engaging with this process, the franchise, the way with this mentality, you will never, ever be able to make a breakthrough. So think about this in the context of philanthropy, right? What was the original intention of philanthropy, the traditional way of looking at philanthropy? What have the changes been? What are the new rules of the game? And are we adequately engaging with them so that we are able to advantage our positions as organizations? That's the basic point. Now, depending on the level of power, you can understand the system and the changes to be able to see how else can I midwife something different that I'm in control over and that benefits, gives me the highest benefit. Let me pause there and ask, am I communicating? Janet says yes.
You are.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, let me ask you a question. What is a system? Sorry. What is a system? Based on what we have said.
A process.
Yes.
Of chain-linked events or a chain-linked flow of things that gives particular results.
Exactly. Thank you. Who was that who was speaking? Perfect summary. So that is a system. There are elements, they are chain-linked, they produce results. And we need to understand in the middle of that process, there is what is called change is happening. And you have to zoom out to look at the issue from a holistic perspective to understand how the system works for you to be able to engage. So let's go back to our cup of tea. You see, because the reason I asked you to make a cup of tea is because that's how we look at problems. We are presented with an issue, and immediately we think about elements. We think about our kettle, our fire, our water, our tea bags, our milk, our cup, okay, to make our cup of tea. But is there something bigger happening with a cup of tea, for example? I dare say yes, because before, those elements had different processes happening with them, right? Before that cup of tea got to you, there was a farmer somewhere who had to do what? To plant tea bags, isn't it? There was the whole process of, I even tried to fish for something. Where is the farmer now? There's the plucking of the tea, there's the wilting, there's the bruising of the tea, boiling of the tea, drying of the tea, there's the packaging, and then by the time it lands onto your table, that's one process. There's another thing happening here in the energy sector. What fire or what is your source of energy? How clean is it? What is it doing? Blah, blah, blah. There's your water here. Is it clean? How are you taking the water? How is it coming to your house? Do you have to go 3 hours for it? You know, if you think about the milk process, there's another one there. If you think about the labor that has gone into all these processes. So if you zoom out from the cup of tea, the process can actually become more complex. Sometimes when we are doing or thinking about our issue, our philanthropy issue, call it the cup of tea that we are making, we try and solve issues from this point of view, okay? This point of view of our process. But we are so oblivious of the other complex things that are going on that make this possible. And one of the things that I am here to, just one of the very simple message I'm trying to put across to you is that for you to actually be successful in your area of work is to zoom out from this cup of tea and ask what else is happening for this cup, for us to arrive at the cup of tea, which means you cannot be a simplistic thinker. You cannot be a Lamo thinker. You cannot be a linear thinker. You have to be a complexity thinker. And it's not to make things hard for you. It's to be able to enhance your learning about the rules of the game. Because this cup of tea is as a result of the rules of the game that are happening in these seemingly very different processes that even don't look like they even ever meet at any point in time. But each of those complex processes do determine how this cup of tea is going to be made. And if you think about it from a point of view of, let's say, trade, the reason why we are calling for fair trade is because they are looking at it from a systems perspective. By the time that chocolate lands on your Valentine's, you know, from your Valentine's significant other, there's a cocoa farmer somewhere in Ghana. Are they disadvantaged because of your eating chocolate or because of Switzerland making millions of money on the backs of Ghana, for example? And perhaps that what we are looking for as answers and innovation may actually not lie in the cup of tea. It may lie in these systems that are underlying or underneath this making our cup of tea. Does somebody want to make a comment there if you look at it from a philanthropic point of view? Anybody wants to make a comment from a point of view of philanthropy? Okay. Yes, Janet.
I can make without having thought a lot about this, but I'm enjoying the conversation.
Yeah.
I think it kind of really forces us to reflect about the context we are in every case.
Yeah.
So if I am thinking about what could philanthropy look like when I'm at a community level, you know, I have to have a broad mind because in simple terms, I'm thinking about what are the giving opportunities for the people at that community level. So they may then give in terms of their time, they may give in terms of some of the things they have. If it is a construction, they may be able to know where the sand is and stuff like that. There may be the local shopkeepers who may give in different ways. So if I'm thinking of coming up with a project at that level, then I have to think about it from that perspective. And so what's going on? If there's a crisis and all their crops are destroyed or something, then I have to know what is that context. I may not expect them to do what they may have done in a different situation.
Yeah.
So, the climate, the environment, maybe there's a catastrophe, all that has an impact. If I come into town, then it means I have to think about who are the people around there, what is their livelihoods like, what are the different segments, So I think it really calls us to kind of be a bit more analytical about each context and more understanding and more thoughtful, even in terms of strategies. And I really like the cup of tea idea because it's also, you said it's cultural. So it's also emerging from, there are those who think about tea, they're thinking about green tea.
Yeah.
I think of tea, I think about my honey, I want my sweet honey. Some people have told me it's not tea, but it doesn't have a lot of sugar,
Yeah.
So all these things come into play. So we may need to sit down a little bit more to be more analytical about the philanthropy we are thinking about in the different contexts. And it's also what makes sense to someone. That's why we keep saying, what is in it for maybe the corporate? How can we create that linkage? So I think it's pushing us to be more analytical.
Yes. Yes, and I really like that as a starter of this conversation, because even in your example of the village, I think giving was expected in a society, isn't it? You would understand this from, so I speak the same mother tongue as Janet, so I can tell her kotonga kwoko, it means kurudisha mkono, yani to come back and give to a place that the place that fed me, I feed back, right? But one of the things you want to ask is, based on time, has that value changed? And if it has changed, do you negotiate? Do you go there with an expectation that it's automatic for people to give back? And if it is not, then if you establish it is not as it used to be, is there a process you need to do before you start even engaging people to give back? And that may mean talking to people and enculturating people, or doing something that makes them see your point of view before you go and expect. So one of the examples, one of the questions that was asked is, we as foundations will go to a community, but they see us our be all and end all, like we are their God. So they don't see us as working together in a relationship. And this systems thinking can really help you unpack that problem to see what then makes them decide that, the way when people have an attitude about government property, because it is government property, it is there to be vandalized. What is the value there that is to be unpacked to make sure that they stop having that kind of attitude, they get the right attitude to be able to engage in a much more holistic way, to be able to get the results we want, which in the end is our cup of tea, right? And so those are the things. A systems approach helps you to resolve some of these issues. And because sometimes we think innovation is more money, more technology, but sometimes innovation is actually that attitude to just do a little bit of training in, and it really shifts a lot of things into the results that you want. And so that in my view is what we need to be doing. So like we said, a system is an interconnected set of elements. And so if you have elements that are not connected, it's not a system. Okay. And the point to make here is that if I take one of these items, for example, it will not affect anything because these things are not connected. How you know an issue is a system is when it is connected. If I take, let's say, the battery or the light, it will affect how this thing functions. And so it is important then to look at what are the connections within a system, how do they function together? If I take one thing or I alter one thing, what will it produce? And so there's another place, and that's why design thinking is becoming a very important part, because it's like prototyping. If you've ever built a house, what tends to happen is that you get a prototype of the house so that you have a visual picture of what that house will look like, just in case you say, I want a roof that looks like this. And when you see it in the cardboard, you're like, no, this is not what I have. Because it is much easier to fix the cardboard than to fix the roof, the real roof of the house. And what you're saying is, part of what we must do is understand our system in the board. or on a computer like this. And so you map your system, try and tweak a little things here and there to see what it produces, then go and implement. And so that is one of the things that is important in systems thinking. Now, so in a nutshell, we are saying, understand what is at play, understand the rules of the game, observe this over time to understand the purpose of the game. So, and the reason we are observing over time is to understand how to engage with the new changes that have happened. So we want to understand a system and why what is happening is happening. So we can't assume, for example, that just because we are talking about philanthropy and without giving, that all of us understand it from the point of view of humanity, for example. We can't take it for granted. So we have to understand, why is it that maybe, I don't know what are the patterns you have seen in your philanthropy space. But for example, if I'm a rich person, you call them high net worth individual, all right? We need to study, why do we have less people, high net worth individuals in Africa? This is guesswork. I'm not in that space, so I'm just guessing. Why is it that high net worth individuals in Africa keep taking, not giving, they take, but in other places they give? That's a very fundamental thing for us to be able to change, because we need those high net worth individuals building society. And that means more resources for the philanthropy space. We need more corporates thinking about, okay, why do they do one-offs? Why don't they do something that is sustainable over a long period of time? Because we know change happens over a long period of time. Let's understand the system or the mindset of a corporate for us to be able to see, okay, how can we, if we want them to stay longer or make much more deeper changes, how do we help them see that a much more longer period of investment is much more better than a short hit and run type? So that if you're, for example, like KCDF, then that is fundraising from those foundations or from those high net worth individuals, you need them to have the same understanding as you so that you can have their resources. And you need to show the mutual benefit, the value proposition for both of you, so that by the time I give you my money, I'm understanding why, what is in it for me, what is the value for me. And my view is that it is not more clever way of fundraising that will help us get better resources or better outcomes. It is the systemic point of view that will help us get a better buy-in that will give us better results. I don't know whether I have communicated, but I trust that I have. And so in thinking about systems, one of the ways of unpacking this for us is what we call the iceberg analogy. And I think you've come across this a lot in other like it's in communications and so forth. That in solving problems, we think about the iceberg that we can see, not the elements that we cannot see. If you think about the Titanic, the builders of Titanic said, even God cannot sink this ship. And I think God said, oh, really? You wait and see. And so they came across these icebergs, right? And when they did, they said, this is a small iceberg. What was their judgment? Their judgment was this part of the iceberg, not the one that is underneath that broke the ship apart. There are things happening underneath. And that's why it is important to understand the rules of the game. The patterns, the behavior, so in events, when you look at things from an events perspective, you react, right? When you look at it when you understand the patterns and behavior, and that is what we were uncovering last week, you begin to anticipate. And I think for you to really understand what I'm saying, for those who were not in class last week, you have to watch that video, because you have to understand the patterns and behavior to anticipate the disruptions that are coming. But today we are now uncovering the structure, the system, the causal relationships, the driving forces, the assumptions that are being made for you to be able, and the mental model. So if you are in Kadonzweni, for example, or in, let's say, where Hola or whatever, or even in Bujumbura, for example, you want to understand what are the mental models of the people I'm working with, what is their mindset, so that I understand what is their level when it comes to the issue of giving. Do they see themselves as recipients only? And by the time you understand these things, you begin to design programs and you begin to design transformational programs that then actually give you the better change results that you need. And so we need to understand the structure and we need to understand the mental models. And systems thinking enables you to do that. So I want us to do to break out into 2 groups, and a page will help me with the breakout rooms. I want each group, and so you can write this just so that you would know, or take a picture of it, so that you tell me, describe something about a philanthropy element of the philanthropy system, right? So I describe a system from there, exploring, that is philanthropy, okay? Just one of them, one of the elements of philanthropy that can pass for a subsystem. Describe some of the constituent parts. Describe how those parts work together to interact, okay? The relationships that they have. What is the power that is there? What are the rules of the game? What are the informal things or the social relationships that are in that system, okay? And then describe what they produce, okay? Does that sound like a clear like set of instructions? Yes, I agree with you, James. Giving in Africa is complex. We can't carbon copy what is done in the West. Yeah, so we want to understand. I mean, I understand that in this group, there are different, you do philanthropy from different perspectives. There are those who are doing it from foundation point of view, you know, high net worth individuals from the business perspective, from the community perspective. But just pick an issue from your group, describe the elements, okay? Describe how that system works, describe what it produces, and then begin to see whether there's something you can tweak in the system to produce something different, okay? All right, Paige. So I'm hoping that somebody in your group has taken a picture of this, and I'm going to give you about 20 minutes. 20 minutes to discuss, and then we'll come back in plenary. Actually, not 20, let's do 15 so that we don't run out of time. Any questions? Okay, we can go into our groups and we'll come back after 15 minutes. Okay, are we in a group? Edna, Nasim, Mwadini?
The rest haven't joined.
Oh, there's a group that has already gone away.
Yeah, but they have not yet joined.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, you can't take them by force, by fire.
I wish I could. I cannot.
Moses.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Okay. Martini? Moses? Martha? Mutami? Okay. I think these ones are not paying attention. Paige, maybe take
Yes.
me to group 2.
Ebu join group 1. Ebu join.
Sorry, I don't know why I have problems joining group 2.
Oh, okay. Just join any.
Let me see if I'm able to join. I think my net is unstable. Sorry.
Okay. It's a problem with Ami.
Okay, I can actually, can I join? Just
join, then I can move you. I can only move you when you join.
Oh, you know, I moved myself out of group 1.
I just joined group 1, then I move you to group 2.
Oh, how do I join? I don't know how to join. It doesn't give me the option.
I would join now. I've moved you to room 2. You can do anything. One.
I would have, all right. So one thing that I agree with you on is that we want to choose one area and then explore that area, not a broader philanthropy. And actually, when I was coming into this group, I had a bias for community, philanthropy and engagement. And when I saw the team that was there, I think that's an area. Not to say that we cannot explore the climate change area. Again, very interesting area. And so I'm open to either. I don't know what Francis is saying, so Janet. All right. Yeah. All right. Shift it to you. We call it climate change or environmental change. Yeah. I think for the interest of time, we can move into the 3 areas that we are supposed to look at. That is some of its constituent parts. I think some of those have already been answered by James. But just to pick our thoughts, is there any parts of this broader conversation on climate change that we need to note down for our group? Now let's quickly go around. Janet.
I was thinking about how my communities as a system contributed towards climate change. So I'm looking at community at one part that we was wanted to address climate change. Then communities must sort of get to understand how are they contributing, how are they funding resources that, the capital trees, their funding systems. What are those different things? So I always see around the areas but they have something to do with the problem and the solution.
Shiri?
Okay, to what Janet just indicated, I would say other aspects that contribute that would also require issues like energy sources. So we cut down trees to build charcoal, build source of fire, or for our building material, etc. So all of that will contribute towards the issues of environmental degradation. Maybe our farming methods also contribute to some extent. But water sources and
Yeah, they have 5 minutes left. They have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, maybe I just need to add one. We are 5 minutes left for our industrial actions. For example, industrial sources of energy. I think those would be one of the constituent parts of this conversation. Anything else on the agreement, Francis?
If I may add, looking at afforestation, whereby there is this, because of deforestation and there's no water enough water into the rivers. You saw that ice thing, and so I'm looking at organization coming together to bring people together to plant trees so that they can bring that climate and water back into the rivers. And also I'm looking at community development and capacity building of the community, teaching them how to take care of the forest around. I was thinking in terms of China, when there's some time ago, some years ago, the Chinese government was pulling everybody out of the forest area and building huge apartments, and they made they grew a lot of trees around so that everybody can have water. So so it is like different organizations internationally trying to come together and what do you call it? Provide I don't know how I can say it. English is hard. I know in numbers and codes provide funds for afforestation, capacity, build people to understand deforestation is not good, and bring forest back so that we can have the normal flow of the natural resources, which is water. Thank you. Just what's up?
Yeah, so before you leave, on a separate note, there are a lot of conversations going on currently at the global level around climate change, and EAPN is part of that conversation. We have a responsibility to localize this conversation around climate change, and I think we sent out a communication sometime back around alarming from climate change, and next week the team will be getting together a lot of subscriptions into that planning group, and if anyone in this case interested in this conversation, we can look and we will do that. Thank you. And we can back.
Looks like we've been
These breakaways are very big, yanked back and forth. It's very traumatizing.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I know we're in the middle of a very good discussion and I am mid-bite. So there was a water discussion and I don't know, Evans and Janet's group, I don't know what your discussion was about, but maybe the water group, because at least I got to listen in a bit. Can somebody present on the water group, just some of the discussions that came out?
I want to ask Chilande to give us she was plotting something and then we will throw in the words.
Okay.
I was doodling. Now that you made us come up with papers.
Yes.
But I didn't finish. I was going to put it on a fresh paper. So what we're doing is we looked at water provision and looking at it from a philanthropic perspective, in keeping with the whole spirit of how do we understand the issues and the interconnectedness of all these different elements. So imagine that philanthropy is right in the middle. we have the critical issue around the water sources, and the water sources are being affected by climate change and some human actions like afforestation and all of that. And that has implications on our targets and goals that we try to set out when we are designing some of our programs. Then you come to the water processing itself. So say we've actually sourced the water, we come to process. Geez, this thing. There we start to encounter, the government and what we politely call the private sector cartels or such things. And, community groups and all those people who are involved in various water processing. So, and then we thought about the end user, and the end user in all their dynamics, depending on your economic status, you will be getting the water through different, channels, the demography that we have. And then, of course, the water provision itself, where we were just getting into discussions around the social systems around all of this. So in terms of philanthropy, therefore, I think it has implications on where we want to impact. It has implications, and where we want to impact will be determined by our muscle in terms of our finances, our capacity, and all of that. So we were still deep in that before we were yanked out.
And I think they are you have triggered in me something quite interesting. I'm actually trying to put for you a model, because in futures thinking, you would see now that if you plot, like you look at your forecasts, it tells you that at least in Kenya, I haven't looked at the East African map to see the water issues, but it tells you that in a few years, we are actually water distressed, right? And I would like to think maybe Uganda might be in a better position, and maybe Rwanda even. I don't know about the others. I can't say with a lot of authority. But futures tells you what is coming, right? Futures tells you that we are, at least some of the countries in East Africa are going to be water stressed, and not even just stressed, scarcity to another level, right? And so it helps you not to wait until that time when we have a crisis. So if you're a foundation and you're thinking about it, Foresight will help you see that as an issue of disruption. Then systems thinking will begin to ask you, okay, let's map out the water system. And I really like what you have talked about, whether it's the social system of water protection, whether it's the water sources. There was even an issue about water financing and water fees. Those are some of the things I picked, right? And anything else around the water. If you look at that system and you lay it out on a canvas, it begins to actually show you what we call leverage points, places where you can begin to say, okay, what do we do in order to start being proactive about this solution on water stress before it happens? And there's a lady who said something very interesting. I didn't catch the name, so you'll forgive me. She said, perhaps our philanthropy then is not even about trying to mobilize the money. It's about getting communities to start restoring their natural habitation so that we restore our water sources. And so perhaps your activity is not so much the money, it's community mobilization to do tree planting and to restore natural habitats. Do you see? So it begins, you're proactively dealing with the problem. You're not even gonna need that much money to do it. Of course, maybe you may want to do some seedlings and decide on the types of trees so that you are also not usurping the water too much and then making it even more scarce faster. But then as a result of that, you have pretty much redefined philanthropy, but you have a long-term goal that has a very specific outcome that you are looking into. And if everybody understands, this is where we are going, this is where we are as a community, this is what we are going to do. Everybody buys into the process. Of course, it's not as simple as I'm saying it, but you're very clear about what needs to be done, because you know the future, you know the present, you know the context, the system, and then you can see what I need to do to contribute to the solution to the problem. So I hope that helps with a bit of systems thinking. Chilande, you raised a very interesting point. In a lot of people's minds, when we teach systems thinking, they start asking, what power do I have to deal with the whole system, right? And now this is just making my life very difficult. I'll show you a video of how that doesn't prevent you from understanding the system and then coming back to say, but what is my organizational mandate? But you are doing your organizational mandate from a much better point of view, Remember what we said about collective intelligence and action. This is where you say, part of my resource is who must I partner with, because this problem is bigger than my organizational mandate. And because of that, you're able to tackle that problem with like-minded people in a much more proactive, but also concerted way. That is not what we call hapakule news. You are funding an education here, another one is funding the same school. I mean, there is no order. And so you won't realize. And that's why the community gets confused and they decide, okay, let's just eat this money that is coming. Because if I'm going to get uniform ×2, why not? Okay. So we'll revisit that in a short while, but I am curious to hear the issue in the next group.
Thank you, Dr. If it was not to the interest of time, I would have said that the other group would have listened to our recording. But now that this was quite close, we'll eliminate that. And also when we were starting this meeting, you had asked whether anyone within the group had interacted with systems thinking. And I think there was one person. We were blessed to have that one person in our group. And so it's like we were already ahead of the game. So we understood the context, the present, and the future. Our topics were very close to each other. We were looking at just a slightly higher level of the conversation of Chilande's group around climate change. So it was all from, the water issues and all that. So the questions that you had asked were around the constituent parts, and we looked at the communities, the young upcoming generation, the industrial players, policymakers, amongst other people who we describe to be part of the constituent parts while looking at the climate change conversation. Looking at how these work together, quite a lot, and most of them are touching on what you've already talked about. For example, looking at communities, are we doing enough in terms of, for example, repositioning them from, alternative ways of still meeting their livelihood? If they are to, for example, stop cutting the trees, change their farming structures, looking at alternative sources of energy. If you go to the industrial side, the young generation, how do we train that next generation? One, in terms of behavioral change to, alternative ways of farming, to other options in terms of cutting down on trees. And you see, the overall objective of all this is to reduce emission of carbon. So probably it's time for us to go back to the basics. One of us said that, from planting of trees to, all that comes with meeting these challenges that we are talking about when looking at climate change issues. So the interconnectedness was around reconnecting with the education system, from the children's perspective, change of curriculum, change of practice, change of our behavior. From the policy side, enacting legislations like with the ministry, is there Ministry of Forestry, but the Forestry Department on how to deal with some of these issues around water catchment areas. Then the last part of the questions that you had asked around what they produce, we are looking at a better world, and probably more income going back into our pockets as communities, as individuals in the entire development system. I don't know whether I did justice to our group, but if there's anything I've left, members, please feel free to add.
Okay. Is anything in that group, anyone? Okay. Yeah, so James, let's assume.
James, we didn't hear you. Any addition?
No, I had no addition. I was just going to say, well done.
Oh,
okay, well done. All right. I'm just completing a graph that I just want to show you water demand. Well, as we go along, I think if someone else is talking, I can manage to do another graph on, I wish I could do demand versus, where is it? Demand versus production, but I've managed to do only demand by 2035. So just give me a minute. Okay. So how was the exercise? How was that exercise for you guys? Did it help?
As the time was short, Dr.
Yes, that's
touching on. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
was,
yeah. Sorry?
It brought to focus the discussions we have just held. It helped us to bring them into, as we say, narrow it down to solving or focusing on a particular area that we would put our minds to.
Yeah. Yeah. So remember last week what we talked about forecasts. So there's a model that we futurists use called the if model, and it can give you some of the data that can be quantified. Somebody mute their mic, please. Let's see. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it's an ifs model. So like, I guess let me hope that at the end of the program I'll be able to do the demand and supply. But this is it helps you do some forecasts. Of course, like I said, you take forecasts with a pinch of salt. But this is in East Africa. This is water demand in East Africa for everything, industrial and domestic, right? And it's from the 70s. You can see the demand was not as high. But as you can guess, as population goes up and as we industrialize more, you can see that the water demand will exponentially grow. My interest would then be to look at a forecast on water supply. How is that going? And assume if it is going this way, it begins to show you how the gap is widening between now, or rather between in that as we go along, right? From 2020 moving forward. And so one of the reasons then you want to do is understand some of these dynamics so that you can see what the leverage points are. You are right in terms of like some of these things you're saying, understanding the system helps us to be able then to see what are the decision points that we could make. Now, I didn't think anyone was going to talk about water. So I just, from my example, I picked, so in a proper systems class, you would do what is called the systems loops. And it can bog you down, but it shouldn't. It's just really trying to figure out connections as you understand them. So assume this is your philanthropy space, and I took philanthropy to mean just the use of resources to help humanity. So there's government money, there's bureaucracy, there's bilateral agreements, there are, traditional funders, there's grant making, there's reporting and proposals. The people getting it are either NGOs, in fact, there's water here. So it looks like that's a big issue. There's all these actors that are at play, there's beneficiaries, there's feedback, there's provision of goods and services. Of course, you can see that public affairs become part of that chain because depending on the leadership that you have and the decisions they make, they determine how the flows of resources are. So we are talking about the higher level of resources, right? But part of, like I said, understanding the system is to unpack each one of these. And so one of the ones we unpacked was this whole thing about revenue generation. So you can see that revenue generation, of course, there's resource accumulation, there's a connection with the social action that people take, there's a connection, although this is picked from somewhere else. I mean, I wouldn't use these words like social. If I was doing an exercise like this with you, I would leave you to just say, okay, what connects to what so that you can get government resources producing, let's say, public goods and services. What is the system that is for the funding? And the point is, when you have this in a canvas, you can begin to be able to start seeing, okay, what decision can I make? For example, what can I make on organizational sustainability to be able to enhance things around, let's say, revenue generation and so forth. So one of the tools we use, although it's a bit complex, but I have actually seen children use this tool and actually use it very well. So it can be complex, but it necessarily not. So these system loops help you to see how things are connecting, but it can also be a very interesting discussion about, do we want them to connect differently? And do we want to produce different results? So this is an example of one other tool that you can use apart from the iceberg to just try and understand how a system is working. Now, again, to recap what we have been talking about, and I know we have about 25 minutes, is to understand our context. The context is philanthropy. My reading, again, I said this is purely from a researcher's perspective and not someone working in the field, is that if you define philanthropy, for example, from a point of view of philanthropy in Africa, you miss this aspect of African philanthropy. So my sense is that holistic definition, again, from a systems perspective, is important. What can we do within Africa or within our context to build philanthropy bottom up? But also, how is philanthropy being built top down? And what are the values and how are they different? How do they align or how are they different? Because again, those rules of the game, like we said earlier, affect how philanthropy happens. So we did say that philanthropy, at least from my reading, is organized giving. Now, in my view, I would unpack this from a systems view. Is giving that organized at this level and at this level? And I would like somebody to just speak into that. Okay, so it is given for the welfare of others. Remember the issue we were talking about, the elements, the relationships, and how the system has changed over time. So the original intention was organized giving. The other original intention was welfare of others. Usually, it contributes to making up for the failure of governments or the marketplace. And the question to ask is this still the purpose of philanthropy? Because from a systems perspective, that's the first place to start. I don't know if anyone has a comment regarding this question. Is this still the purpose of philanthropy? The answer could be yes and no, depending on how the angle that you are taking. Anybody?
Let me chime in, Katindi.
Yeah.
I remember from last as we unpacked the data, we came to the realization that philanthropy, and because of the funders who are now funding philanthropy, there's an element of investment.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose of philanthropy, yes, it's for the common good, but then there's also a growing linkage with how does it support business for those that support philanthropy.
Yeah, thank you, Ida, for that. And the question maybe to ask is, how does that change the rules of the game? Because that begins to give us pointers to some of the things we must engage with if we want to really see change in our organizations, or to answer the questions that were problems in the problems we were trying to solve. Is the question clear? So Ida talks about investment, that what we saw from the data is that giving is now tied to private investments. You understand that the people who are giving are not just, you remember how like in the 90s, civil society organizations were given just money, you go do this in the community. And really, there was even a rule. The rule of the game was we cannot work with private sector because they make their own money, right? But now the rules of the game post 2015 has changed, and that we want value for the money we give. And so based on that, we are going to work, yes, with governments, with civil society organizations, with private sector. And we've seen a shift from aid to trade. That already is beginning to tell you the rules of the game are changing. What I'm asking you to unpack for this philanthropy space is, as people who are in philanthropy, and I know there are corporate foundations here, so that may make things a bit complex. But if you come from the school of thought that you're giving resources to a community to solve like a water problem, but now the rules of the game are saying that, yes, as much as we are giving for the good of the community, there's an element of private investment that has come into these rules. What are the implications of that giving to your space, for example?
I think there's a lot There's a lot, and my mind is just working in so many different ways. As things have evolved, even just the lingo you're talking about, aid to trade, right? From social responsibility, which was rooted in humanity, to social investment, which went into the economic realm. Even when you talk about giving for the good, it's not necessarily, they don't, I rarely hear for the good of the community now. I hear meet a community need. And even when they're meeting that community need, there's a lot of terms and conditions around it. It's as long as that need meets my agenda. And as long as it makes financial sense. So it has changed a lot of how things are done, how much is done, how deep things go, who are the players. I mean, it's just changed the whole ecosystem, I think. I could go on and on, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you. But you're on the right track. That here we are as community foundations stuck on social good. But things have changed to social investment. Why are you wondering why you're not getting money? Because you're not in the train for social investment. Ask yourself, I don't know, is there anyone here from Equity Foundation? Anybody? Jiseme kabla nianze to talk about equity. Okay, why is it that Equity Foundation is attracting the who's who with the monies? With the it's a corporate, it's making its own money, but it's attracting philanthropic resources to do what other community foundations could have done, but they're not the ones attracting that money. What is the difference?
Dr. I would suppose it is the packaging, the way they have packaged themselves as a social investment outfit that is bridging the gap between the need, the demand, and the actual sources of the funding. So they have packaged themselves as a vehicle that would facilitate the process.
Exactly. So first of all, they've gotten into the bandwagon of social investment. Remember, equity, by educating those young people, do you think it's just doing it? Okay, of course it's doing it. They're educating young people as a social investment. But what does social investment mean? They are a bank, isn't it? What does their social investment mean for them in the future? It means more customers, guys.
Yeah, it means more customer base, expanding the customer base that they are.
They're expanding their customer base. They are doing it by taking these young people and molding them into the theory of change, if you may, or the change framework of equity, right? That this is how you do business. So imagine the loyalty levels that they are raising by getting these young people in their young age, in their time of need, and giving them the highest level of education. Just imagine the level of loyalty they will have in terms of, they're not just building a customer base, they're also they're riding on the issue of loyalty in the name of giving back. That sounds bad. It sounds really bad. It sounds like we are using them. But truth be told, that's how social investments work. Nipe nikupe, right? Nipe nikupe. So what value, and it is that model is based on value for money. So in our work, what we are asking is, to what extent are you doing projects that can demonstrate value for money for the person who then doesn't want to give, they want to do social investment? And those two perspectives or paradigms are very different. And they determine the approach, or what somebody called the packaging, of how then you go and say, please come and work with us to solve this community problem. Any comments? Any disagreements? I need pushback.
Maybe
Yes.
I can come in.
Yes, Janet.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the situation, is complicated, or has continued to be complicated. And that's why I think we have to constantly be rethinking and trying to check what's going on. And probably just to go back, I think I mean, even when we just think about giving, I would just say it's giving, not necessarily organized giving. And so that way I would be able to incorporate all kinds of giving, the organized one, the informal one, the Ubuntu, etc.
Okay.
And then, of course, the people are at different levels. There's that bit which is just at a very basic level, what is possible. And of course, now there are the big actors, the equities and others. But I think there's a lot to do with, if we understand now how people are packaging themselves, then the question is, how do we change our communication? Because sometimes we have it, but we are not communicating it in the way that would reach that social investment, you know. But actually it's just that, so sometimes I think our training we may need more support in our communication. Because the corporate communication and what you are calling social value, we probably, if you have a conversation with a group, you'll probably be able to unpack it. So it's us becoming a bit more informed and more sharp in that. Maybe that's partly what you're calling the packaging, so that we actually communicate that, what is that change? What is that social impact that you are making? It's not that it is not there, it is there, but and then, of course, those vehicles you are talking about, of course, they have the best, resources to get all the communication expertise and language, and that's why sometimes you find organizations with a certain, I don't know, for lack of a better word, some people hire Mzungus so that they can get the language, to be able to
money.
Exactly, so that they can attract the money. And so I think we're in a situation where we are challenged to really upgrade ourselves, not miss the changes that are happening, so that we can become relevant in this very different world, that has happened.
Yeah, and Janet, I think you said
another thing then comes. Do we adjust so that we continue with the normal agenda which have been set by the Westerners? Because by the way, it came from them. How they have been doing it. As you were saying, Daktari, you can see that, for example, whatever equity does probably is not one of the best, but imagine even the other people who are giver, the donors, they behave the same. Why do billionaires decide to form NGOs? Is it not to take action? Is it not to do different things, but they're doing something good?
Yeah.
Even when we are in abroad, why do people give? They give because they like giving, or saving money because anyway they ask for tax and funds. What is the social thing? What is this motive? Why are we doing whatever we are doing? Because I'm thinking we need, as African philanthropists, come with our own way how to define and how to utilize what we have for the better of our food. Because now, whatever you are talking about, it's the Westerners who have been talking, even G70, they have been talking about social investment as a way to address their problems. They're pushing towards us, we are saying the same.
Yeah.
But more what we are thinking is business, is money, and retaining it, and probably making sure you are doing the best you're doing without interfering from the government.
Yes, and that's why I think Clement and Janet, you've hit on the core point I wanted to make. If you remember the earlier slides that I had, is that at the point of interconnection, what are the things that makes those interconnections possible? Is the physical flows or the information flows? And so you're right in saying the information flows have to be spot on for the connections to align and for you to be able to get the outcome that you want. And that yes, so that can come in packaging or how we communicate. It also, in what Clement is saying is that perhaps we who are in community development and need to resist the Western way of doing things, need to find a way of communicating and mobilizing masses that can be able to then make African philanthropy and the way of doing things for our context much more visible. Right? And in a way that then, for example, if I'm going to a corporate foundation, right? Like my friend Ambrose, I think, was here at some point, like Kenjen, for example, I need Kenjen to understand that if you want to work in a community, this is this is one of the ways we need to craft a way in which we can convince these private foundations to invest in this context in the way that works for us. And part of that is, again, dealing with the information flows, because they will work with you on the basis of what they know, unless you change the tide to say, this is what would be more useful, whether it's invest longer term, whether it's invest in a certain way, that is a bit different, but they need to be convinced, because you need to package the information flow in a way that then aligns, and you both get your value proposition or value outcome. Yeah, I can see I'm running out of time, and I don't want you to leave this space without the video I wanted to show you. So allow me to go on and say that. So again, one of those things, then, the part of the communication flows, and still looking at the rules of the game, is what are the values that are at play at whatever level, whether it's African philanthropy or any other, and looking at what is informing decision making, and how do we either tweak it or enhance it or eliminate what we don't want, so that it works for both our, our investment. Because even you as a community philanthropist are investing in this community, right? So and we need, and people in the community also need to have a mindset of, how is this not a gift to be misused, but how is it an investment in me? So that you also begin to align your communication flow with how they receive their investment. And the reason why, we pay a lot of attention to giving, right? But we never pay attention to receiving. Let me give you an example. Think about people who have won this sports pesa, all this, what are they called? Gambling resources, right? What happens? Or even athletes. The other day there was, you get a huge amount of money just like that. What happens? It can destroy you. But we never think about philanthropy from a point of reception and the challenges that are in reception that need to be resolved. And again, I'm saying systems thinking helps you to look at the value sets from those points of view and fix what needs to be fixed, so that we are all in alignment when it comes to our information flows for the best outcome. Let me proceed to say, this was just part of my reading, but I don't think it's important. Let me show you two videos. One is about systems thinking in a nutshell, just to summarize what we have talked about, and how you don't have to do everything in the system, but concentrate on the part that you do, but you get effective results. The second one is the challenges of not looking at things from a systems perspective. What kind of failures will you get from that? And then we can close the session, okay? So let's listen in.
Systems thinking, a way to maximize program effectiveness. Systems thinking. Maybe you've heard of it, are doing it, or you've heard that you should be doing it. What is it, and what does it mean for the senior manager? Let's start by looking at what a system is. A system is any kind of entity that is made up of parts that interact. Together, these parts and their interconnections create a whole, which in turn produces some kind of result. Using a systems perspective is important because it helps us to better understand what helps or hinders the success of health interventions. Here's an example. Meet Suzanne. Suzanne is a senior manager in a large regional health organization. The high rate of obesity is an issue in her community, and she's been mandated to address this problem. Her first instinct is to develop a program to get more people active. But what is realistic to expect from this approach? Systems thinkers believe that viewing a program like this, part, in isolation of the larger system within which it operates, the whole, tends to ignore other aspects that might influence its potential for impact. Why? Research tells us that obesity is the result of a combination of many physiological, psychological, social, environmental, and economic factors that all interact with one another. For example, at the individual level, there are issues such as human physiology, exercise habits, food choices, and one's occupation. But beyond the individual, there are other factors at play, such as the local built environment, quick and easy access to junk food, and larger food industry practices, such as trends in portion sizes, sugar, and fat content. The interaction of all these influences make obesity the product of what we call a complex system. If Suzanne were to use a systems approach, she would realize that relying on simple linear cause and effect solutions for one program would ignore those interactions and likely fail. While Suzanne's staff at the program level have a tendency to think only within the boundaries of their program, senior managers and planners like Suzanne are in a unique position to do what systems thinkers call zooming out. Zooming out considers how other aspects outside of a program's traditional boundaries, both within the organization and beyond, might influence the success of the program. By zooming out and looking at the influence of other interventions, policies, structures, patterns, and norms in the broader system, Suzanne is better able to strategically consider other values and perspectives and the interrelationships among each that may impact obesity rates in her community. In doing so, she can identify more powerful leverage points outside of the program that have the potential to facilitate and support changes in obesity. Leverage points are places within the system that can be tweaked in a way that supports greater impact. For example, are there actions Suzanne and her team might take that could increase the community's access to opportunities for physical activity? While some leverage points are within Suzanne's capacity to change, others will be beyond her control. However, it will still be useful to be aware of these as she plans for the program. Adopting a systems view won't change the boundaries of this program, but it will expand the boundaries of the evaluation. By recognizing the importance of the different perspectives and values of those outside the program and the interrelationships throughout the system, Suzanne can ensure that the evaluation is framed in a way that captures the key boundaries, diverse perspectives, and interrelationships that serve as important leverage points in the system. Of course, Suzanne's budget won't permit an evaluation of the entire system, but she can ensure that any evaluation she commissions will provide her with more strategic direction on how to effectively address obesity within her community. For example, in addition to recommendations for improving the program, the results of the evaluation might indicate opportunities for new partnerships or external policy change. If her community has poor walking and cycling infrastructure, where might she and her team advocate? Or who could they collaborate with to make changes? By asking these questions, Suzanne is finding that using a systems approach helps her focus on the broader issue of obesity in her community instead of a single program in her organization. She gains a better understanding of what external factors are influencing the program's success and can set more reasonable expectations of what it can accomplish. She's also learning what needs to change both within and outside of the program to better maximize her organization's effectiveness. Many now believe that a systems approach holds the most promise for addressing complex health problems like obesity, which is not only good for Suzanne, but good for everyone.
Okay, let's so let me not add any more slides, but let's look at the opposite of not looking at things from a systems perspective, and then we close. All right.
In the 1950s, the Dayak people of Borneo, an island in Southeast Asia, were suffering from an outbreak of malaria. So they called the World Health Organization for help. The World Health Organization had a ready-made solution, which was to spray copious amounts of DDT around the island. With the application of DDT, the mosquitoes that carried the malaria were knocked down, and so was the malaria. There were some interesting side effects, though. The first was that the roofs of people's houses began to collapse on their heads. Turns out the DDT not only killed off the malaria-carrying mosquitoes, but it also killed a species of parasitic wasps that had controlled a population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Thatch being what the roofs of the Dayak people's homes were made from. Without the wasps, the caterpillars multiplied and flourished and began munching their way through the villagers' roofs. That was just the beginning. The DDT affected a lot of the island's other insects, which were eaten by the resident population of small lizards called geckos. The biological half-life of DDT is around 8 years, so animals like geckos do not metabolize it very fast. it stays in their system for a long time. Over time, the geckos began to accumulate pretty high levels of DDT, and while they tolerated the DDT fairly well, the island's resident cats, which dined on the geckos, did not. The cats ate the geckos, and the DDT contained in the geckos killed the cats. With the cats gone, the island's population of rats came out to play. We all know what happens when rats multiply and flourish. Pretty soon, the Dayak people were back on the phone to the World Health Organization, only this time it wasn't malaria that was the problem. It was the plague and the destruction of their grain stores, both of which were caused by the overpopulation of rats. This time, though, the World Health Organization didn't have a ready-made solution and had to invent one. What did they do? They decided to parachute live cats into Borneo. Operation Cat Drop occurred courtesy of the Royal Air Force and eventually stabilized the situation.
So I think the point to make here is that if you don't understand the interrelationships of things, solutions can cause more problems, because sometimes we prescribe a solution and there are some unintended consequences in that solution that we have made. And so simple questions sometimes require complex and reflective thinking if good solutions are to be found. It is always better to manage by design than by default. And that's what we were saying. Once you understand the system on your board, you try and prototype solutions. You can actually create very unconventional answers to some of the problems we are seeking to solve, sometimes not even with the too many resources we think we require when we look at things from a program's perspective. And that way we get much more benefits and maybe solve the issue in a much more fundamental way than when we could have if we didn't understand the rules of the game. So with that, allow me to finish. If anyone has a question, at least, oh, sorry, yeah, out of time, but just to leave you with this, it's not a very good saying, but yeah, you need to learn the rules of the game so that you know how to break them properly. In this case, I guess what I'm trying to leave you with is understand the rules of the game and how things are happening so that you know how to intervene in a much more strategic way. All right, thank you guys. Over to you, Evans.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katindi. Before I make very few remarks, which I don't want to go more than 2 minutes, I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of this series that we've been running. We have one more session to go, which will be the last session, and that will be looking at strategic decisions necessary for organizations like yours and mine, and by extension, the sector, and the leadership that is needed to navigate the philanthropy trends, their implication, and the systems that we have looked at today. So that is what we are looking at in the last session that we shall be undertaking. And that session will be next week. And we've crafted a series of these kinds of conversations and talking about the trends and the practices that we are going to refound in that last session we are looking at. I want to challenge each and every one of you that for us to really position ourselves as sector players and the actors within this space that we are serving, we've got to really understand the sector. And so we are undertaking a research around the trends and the practices within the philanthropy space and giving as a whole in the East Africa region. I think we have only one more week within the data collection. And if there's anyone in this call today who has not yet undertaken that research, please find 10, 20 minutes and support us in that process. We will also be, as we tackle how we can reposition ourselves to deal with those trends and practices, looking at these learnings that we have been undertaking, we are also strengthening our learning groups. And so one of the learning groups that we are having. I think there are around 11 learning groups. There's one hosting its meeting on the 17th of this month. That's around community philanthropy, and quite a number of series around those learning groups, including one on climate change, leadership and governance, disability, so that those trends that we are looking at within the broader sector and then be dissected deeper within those specific sectoral engagements. And I want to encourage all of you to be part of those conversations. And that goes into the conference. And today, all of you are honored to be the first to know about our conference coming up in September. And team will not be so happy with this, but because today I'm so generous with many things, I would wish that this team becomes the first to know about. Am I still on page?
Yes, you are.
All right. So this team becomes the first to know about our conference. The date of the conference will be 7th to 9th of December. We are looking at the theme re-engineering philanthropy. And I'll just give a very snapshot of what we'll be looking at. The first pillar of the conference will be around building resilience, where we want to align ourselves to changes within the philanthropy ecosystem and climate. The second pillar will be around ensuring relevance. How do we innovate and come up with the innovations that fit and adapt to these new realities that we are talking about within the philanthropy space? And then lastly, the last pillar will be looking at we'll be looking at enabling environment, and we'll just be exploring how we can have increased focus on opportunities to strengthen our alliances within the region and at the local level, building on other initiatives that we are also running in the region in collaboration with some of you. We want to look at how do we inspire philanthropy actors to commit and up accountability standards, and we will look to build critical masses to advance the needed changes within the enabling environment conversation we've been having over the last many years. And so my encouragement to all of you is to continue supporting our endeavors to strengthen the philanthropy space. And we welcome all of you into all these initiatives that we are running, because we are, because you are. So thank you so much. And I wish all of you a very productive day ahead. Yes, Dr.
Yeah, I was just saying that this session, it won't be me talking, but the team. So I'm hoping people won't run away. I want us to just take the 3 lessons that we've learned. And I noted down what everyone was concerned about. So I think I'll just type it in, and I'll give us a set of questions that you can answer in relation to what you are most concerned, so that you just give us a brief, like maybe just prepare something for 5 minutes that can begin to say, how can you apply the tools that we have learned in the 3 sessions to solve the problem that you discussed earlier, right? So I guess those who are not there in the first session can give us what they are most concerned about in their philanthropic space. So we had things like, how do we tilt the power? How do we shift the power? Or how do we have a culture of influence in the development aid space? Or how do we increase internal resource mobilization? Such kinds of things. So just think about what is the biggest challenge for you as someone working in the philanthropy space, then see how to apply those tools. Because it is in that collective learning and in internalizing the tools that we can say that we have done a masterclass that is beginning to actually practically address what we are saying. So mine will be to actually facilitate a conversation rather than talk back at you. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Thank you so much. And lastly, sorry guys, before I let you go, we also want to continue recognizing and celebrating the outstanding contribution of individuals and organizations like yours towards strategic social development and the general growth of the philanthropy movement in the region. And so our East Africa Philanthropy Awards, again, will be taking place during the conference, and the conference will be a hybrid of very few physical attendees and virtual attendees. And from next week on Monday, a lot of information around the conference and the awards and the many other initiatives that we are driving will be hitting your inboxes. And so engage with us, support us, as we also look at engaging with you and supporting you. Thank you, and God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Asanteni sana kila mtu.
Kwaheri.
Thank you. Bye-bye.